Hello, until the bold alone, welcome back. Tonight we continue the Civilands series with Chapter 5 of Book 2 Crystallized. This chapter is entitled Cartomancy. Thanks as always for listening in. My name is Nicholas Austin. This is Tuesday Night Fiction. Let's get started.
This sound will come with spirit true. I swear I'll hear that sound in you.
Though the man used Judith for cover, William could make out a thick brown beard and long unruly hair protruding behind her. This man didn't look or dress like the other Highlanders, which made William think he wasn't one. Those thieves had their own kind of brand to them, but whoever this man was, he'd won as far as William was concerned. William would do whatever it took to get the barrel of that gun off Judith's temple. He was filled with rage at the sight of it there, threatening his wife. "I don't want to hurt her, but I'll do what I have to do." "Well, that's good to hear, because if you lay a harmful finger on her, I don't care what your intentions were. I'll skin you alive, you motherfucker. You hear me?" William stood up, wiped the blood from his eyes, and grabbed his pistol off the ground. He gestured for Cassius to lower his weapon. Cassius followed his instruction on command. "What is it you're after? We've got a wagon over there full of goods. And we fought off enough Highlanders already, so we don't want any more unnecessary trouble. You can take all of it. You can take your woman over there under that horse too, if she's yours. She seems to be alive still for now." "That ain't my woman," the man said, confirming William's suspicions. The man backed further away, dragging Judith with him. "I ain't one of them thieves neither. I don't even live on this side of the stream. But I was watching y'all like I watch all outsiders. When I see trouble being caused, I stop it, only to defend my home. Then y'all went and killed my damn hogs." "Your hogs?" William asked, partly trying to stall but also curious. "What, do you train them or something? That ain't none of your business what I do. All you gotta know is they was mine, and you killed them. Look, friend, we're sorry about your pigs, but they attacked us. So we did what we needed to do to defend ourselves," Cassius said. "I think it's only reasonable of us to want to preserve our own lives. So please, tell us your name, and let's talk this out like men." "My name's Bronson Mathis. Now I'll be reasonable, but I'm afraid one of y'all will have to pay for what you've done. It's only fair. Which one of y'all's in charge here?" William stepped forward with his hands up. He didn't agree with Bronson's definition of fair, but he'd pay what the man wanted to get Judith back by his side. "My name's William Keagan, and I'm in charge. We Keagans have a lot of power here in the Murrieta, but we can get you whatever it is you want. There are plenty more hogs in the lands we control back west we can provide you with. We could also give you the goods we have with us in the meantime." "That sounds like a start, but I'm also going to need the guarantee y'all will get out of my home here. And leave your weapons behind with me." "Well, now, Bronson, we'd be defenseless. Y'all will leave them and go, or this lady will die." Bronson jerked the gun against Judith's temple, which made the others jump. With a cringe, William waved his hands. "No! Just take the gun off her, please." Out of the corner of William's eye, he spotted a rustling in the stalks. He looked to Cassius, who nodded. He'd seen it too. Were they about to suffer another ambush? Or was whatever was in the stalks what Bronson wanted to protect? "All right then, drop your weapon." Bronson gestured for William to come toward him with his revolver. William followed his command, throwing down his pistol and creeping forward with the attacker's gun now trained on William, but his arm still holding Judith to his side. "You next," Bronson said, indicating Cassius drop his weapon. but instead, Cassius aimed his rifle at the field of stalks. Bronson trembled as he pointed his weapon back to Judith. Cassius pulled back the bar, taking things a step further. "I don't know you, Bronson Mathis. If I'm not mistaken, though, which I'm usually not, I read you to be a sensible man. And I could also read that whatever is shaking those stalks is what you really care about, ain't it? That, or you've got a plan to ambush us. So which is it? I don't know what you think is going on, but you better not take another step, you bastard." Bronson jerked Judith closer to him. William was beginning to get nervous and frustrated with the risk it seemed Cassius was taking. William was just as concerned with an ambush, but that was no reason to put Judith at risk. It might never come to be if they cooperated. If Cassius's gamble resulted in harm to Judith, he'd kill both men. "All right now, let's just hold on a goddamn second," William said. "Cassius, don't take another step." Cassius nodded but kept his eyes on Bronson. "Now Bronson, hear this." William locked eyes with Judith, communicating for her to trust him. "I don't think any of these threats of violence are necessary. Now we're sorry for being involved with some trouble in your land. But if you live around here, you're aware the Highlanders are the true source of that trouble. We were just making our way through and defending ourselves. Look, the value you place in keeping your home safe, I respect it. You thought we might be a threat, so you attacked us first. Any man would do the same." William paused, taking a breath, and laid out his offer. "And I understand we went and killed those hogs of yours, which I'm thinking are your main line of defense. And now you need recompense to survive in this dangerous land here. So let's settle this. We'll repay you the hogs as soon as we get a message west. And in the meantime, we'll leave you our goods and 2 of our weapons. But we'll take the rest to defend ourselves, as we aren't out of Prayer's Passage yet. In exchange, you let my wife go and let us on our way, and we'll leave you alone. All your weapons." William grinded his teeth at the man's obstinacy. "You're a stubborn man, Bronson. But there's one thing you aren't taking into account." "What's that?" "Cassius? The fact that if you don't settle this peacefully, you will die, Bronson Mathis. And if you die, so do the folks you're hiding in those stalks over there. I may not hit them right this minute, but if you harm Judith or William just to try to get everything you want, you can bet Henry, who's got a gun trained on you, will kill you, and then I'll burn the field to the ground with them in it." Both William and Bronson shifted their attention to Henry, who'd been quiet throughout this whole exchange, to see that Henry did indeed have a gun aimed at Bronson from beside the house. "So what'll it be, Bronson? Are you going to be reasonable and take William's generous offer?" Cassius had a different brand of intensity than William's brother Clovis. Unlike Clovis, Cassius did not smile or perk up in any way with his threats. Instead, his face was stern, and he seemed to sulk as his words got darker. There was a kind of resentment and accepted necessity in them. Bronson froze inside. He glanced dejectedly toward the stalks, and then down at the ground, cursing under his breath. "All right, but you don't hurt me or mine. You've got my word no one will be harmed," William interjected, now feeling some hope for the safety of his wife, who also was beginning to calm herself. "Cassius will throw his weapons down at the same time as you, and we'll talk this out. Isn't that right, Cassius?" Cassius nodded at both men. "Of course," he agreed. "I'll count down from 3 and throw them down if you agree to do the same." Yes, Bronson uttered. "I agree." 3, Cassius started. 2. William looked reassuringly into Judith's eyes as she began to shake. 1, now, Cassius called. Both men threw away their weapons, and William breathed a massive sigh of relief as an emotional Judith came running into his embrace. Bronson whistled, and a woman and a young boy emerged from their hiding place in the field. The woman walked into Bronson's arms. When he let her go and she turned to face the Keagans, William noticed her bandana-covered hair was also messy. Both she and her son were dressed in light tan outfits, which were as ragged as Bronson's. Yet there was something very different about this woman. even beyond a youthful glow that made her appear to be somewhere in her 20s. If you don't mind my asking, is this your wife and son? William asked. That's right, Bronson said. My wife Nova and my son Kai. Now that we're past trying to kill each other, it's a pleasure to meet y'all, William joked, growing curious about who these people were. Y'all live here? As they talked, Cassius went off to fetch the horses and recover only some basic provisions from their wagon. As promised, they'd be leaving the goods with Bronson. These abandoned homes along the waterway are about as far north as we go when the Highlanders are off, and we can use them for shelter, Bronson answered William. Anything further is their territory. We don't want no part of them. We spend the rest of our time south beyond the cliffs. It's a place they tend to stay away from since the wildlife's a little more wild. But we patrol all of the passage, as we've had a fair few coming in to try to take what's ours by starting here first. We've been following your group to make sure you were just passing through. Once y'all didn't run from the Highlanders and fought them instead, we worried you'd come for us next. Those Highlanders are already enough of a burden for us. They're what truly makes Prayer's Passage what it is. I never understood the Highlanders, William said, glancing over at the woman pinned beneath her horse. She was wheezing heavily, and he almost pitied her helplessness. They claim to be free since they have no authority or organization, yet they identify as a group and obviously live in groups. They are no different from the gangs, other than the fact that they have no loyalty, even, I guess, to each other. Bronson tilted his head and frowned. I take it you folks are part of the gangs then? That's right. I'm a leader of the Keagan gang. William was proud to say it. We aren't like the other gangs though. It's my intention to unite the Murrieta and connect it with the East in trade and prosperity. Of course, it would be under our leadership. But sometimes a kind yet forceful leader is needed to tame such a wild place. I intend to take care of the passage too. Y'all better believe that. Forgive me, but you are no different than the others, Mr. Keagan. Nova chimed in. Excuse me? Judith snarled. William, whose lip curled into a grin, lifted a calming hand to his wife. The wound on his face stung, and he almost grabbed at it as his cheeks perked up. No, that's fine. No need to be alarmed, Judith, he insisted. Honesty's only ever a good thing, especially in a place where it would otherwise remain hidden. Speaking of which, there's something familiar about you, Nova. I can't seem to place it. I don't know if it'll help much with all the types of people there are back east. But which city are you from? Nova's eyes widened as she looked to Bronson. Nova isn't from the cities. She's from here. Well, no one's from here. Unless... William started as the truth hit him. The Hawks. Your son and you were the ones controlling them, weren't y'all? Y'all are natives. Nova's expression went icily stern. That is right, she affirmed. We are natives. Another painful smile overtook William's face at the news, but he was too intrigued to try and hold it back. Fascinating you two are together, he said. But I suppose it's not my place to judge. So y'all just live off the land out here and patrol the passage? That's also right, Bronson said. Nova and I met and fell in love a little less than 10 years ago. I came to the Murrieta at a time no other Easterners dared to. When I realized how freely I could live here, I decided to stay. A while later, I came across this beautiful creature, and we bonded in that common interest. It's the only way we know how to live now. Free. In a way, we've become a part of this place, so we feel it's our duty to keep our eyes peeled whenever people come in or out of the passage. It's a bit easier too, thanks to Nova and Kai's abilities. Cassius returned with the horses, which he set up for riding. Bronson, a deal's a deal as you made it with William. So if you're wanting the provisions and goods we have, I'd suggest you hide them in that field now for later. Or load them up on some horses if you got some hidden away somewhere. Whatever you like, but now's your chance. Bronson turned to Nova, who nodded and let out a tremendous yet soothing whistle. It felt supernatural and musical in its pitch, as if it were beckoning to its target, rather than calling. 2 horses appeared in the distance out of an opening in the canyon and ran over at an astounding pace. The family got right back to work once the stallions arrived. Cassius pulled 3 bottles of alcohol from the wagon and strolled into the house. William stood watching Bronson's family, and an idea came to him. He was ever the strategist after all. "I'll tell you what," William said, approaching Bronson, who was securing his saddlebags. "My gang's growing fast, and we won't stop growing anytime soon. I know y'all probably aren't fond of that, but if y'all can help see us the rest of the way through the passage now, and do so again on our return a week later, I'll personally ensure this lifestyle you're currently enjoying is maintained when we move in here and control the Highlanders. You don't need to travel with us either. If you could monitor our surroundings and have our back if there's any more trouble, I'd forever be in y'all's debt." Bronson looked at Nova and ran his fingers through his messy beard. "Like I've said, the Highlanders are a plague on the passage," he scorned. "So I see no harm in making an ally with their enemy. I suppose you have a deal, if Nova permits it." Turning to Nova in anticipation, William clenched his fists. "No man can tame this place, William Keagan," she started to William's despair. "It would best suit you to remember when considering the steps of this journey of yours. That being said, we will help you." As William went to shake their hands, Cassius emerged from the house, which was erupting with flames. "We should be going now," he informed them. "The fire will draw the attention of the Highlanders and should distract them long enough for us to make our escape to Dorshire if we ride fast. Before we leave, I need to know," William said, turning to Nova and Kai. "I'm familiar with the native clans, especially the Tokali, but they don't seem to have much of a grip on their abilities at all. Does that make you Vahani then?" "Our son and I do not identify ourselves with either clan distinctly," Nova posited, mysteriously. "Okay," William stretched his head. "One more thing, though. You said 'our son.' Does that make Bronson Kai's true father?" Bronson nodded. "Yes, it does. I know what you're wondering. Since Kai has native blood in him, he too has the abilities of his mother. It's not needed for both parents to be native if faith in the mother deity is practiced and training maintained. Don't get the wrong idea though and think there would be any way around her place here." William was speechless. Never had he considered the possibility of mixing the bloodlines of natives with Easterners. In a way, he was slightly repulsed by the idea. However, this revelation would change some things. "Thanks again for your help," he relayed to Nova, who nodded. William lifted 2 pistols and handed them over to Bronson. Another 2 were slipped into his own holsters as he dashed over to his horse and climbed up. Guiding it over to Judith, who would be riding with him, he extended one of the pistols to her. "If you still want to kill the Highlander, you can," he offered kindly. "Thanks, but no thanks. I think that woman's some kind of demon after my first 2 attempts both went to shit. So I'll pass for now. I'm content with her suffering." The different layers of his wife never ceased to amaze William. He pulled her up onto his horse, and she wrapped her arms around him from behind. Reveling in every minute of her embrace, he was overcome with joy she was safe. In his world, her safety had the highest of importance, well before his own. Having been presented with the possibility of losing her just minutes before, William felt he would happily give his life for this woman if it would ever come to it again. As Cassius and Henry rode off like lightning, she gave him a gentle kiss on the cheek. Once again, he beamed despite the pain of the cut nearby her pec. With that, they stormed off for Dorshire. Well, that will do it for part 1 of 3 tonight. In part 1, we got to meet Bronson, Nova, and Kai. And luckily for William, these are some friendlies. We're going to find out more about them as the series continues. We're going to find out about more of where William is going back east with his comrades as the series continues. But for now, William, Judith, Cassius, and Henry are somewhat safe and continuing on through Prayer's Passage. Let's get on to part 2 of 3 now. Things were not getting any easier for Gregory. He shook his head as he walked through the halls to meet with Colin McCormick and Frankie Covington. The two drove him crazy. He knew William wanted to keep them here, rather than sending them back to Daniel or Clovis, but he found the two men rather annoying. They bickered constantly, as Colin, with his heavily scarred face, seemed to consider Frankie a youthful nuisance, and Frankie was beginning to grow into his own enough not to appreciate it. Maybe it was something about having a role in the Keagan house that bolstered Frankie's confidence. Gregory tended to side with him over Colin, who was extremely impatient and obsessed with getting back to the north. After William ordered the not-so-dynamic duo to remain at the mansion and do whatever Gregory asked, he tasked them with providing him updates on how things were progressing outside the Keagan mansion, as well as overseeing the communication of any orders he gave. The pair was already sitting in the study when he came in, and unsurprisingly, they were bickering. "Ah, Gregory, perfect. Perhaps you can end this debate and enlighten this idiot boy," Colin said as Gregory took a seat with a sigh. "What'd I tell you about calling me a boy? Why can't you quit it already?" "Look, I'm not getting in the middle of whatever garbage you two are throwing at each other." Gregory was in no mood, scratching furiously at his head. It felt to him at times like there were tiny bugs running through what was left of his hair, but he knew it wasn't true. He had someone look. There were no bugs. It was just a thing he felt. "What news do you have for me?" Gregory asked. "First, please tell the boy my green is the same as your green." "What?" Gregory was lost. "I just think it's possible the green you see, that you've seen your whole life, might be different than the one I do," Frankie defensively chimed. "I mean, reds and blues too. Really any color, I mean." Colin's shoulders shrugged and he lifted his hands before pointing to Frankie. "See what I have to deal with?" he asked. "The hash this twit spews out of his mouth sometimes." "I guess it's..." Wait, no. Gregory caught himself from getting wrapped up in their spat, even though he thought the question was an interesting one. "Just tell me what I need to know. I'm growing wrinkles and my hair is growing by the day. The last thing I need right now is the stress you two consistently provide me. Daniel sent news of a murder in Harran. He's investigating it, but he says he needs Clovis soon, since he fears there might be some rebellious types afoot," Frankie answered. "Also, Clovis said he isn't ready yet, and the messenger made a point, these were Clovis's exact words. He's having too much fun right now, but will be ready soon probably." "I could go up to Harran if you send me with some..." Colin started. "No," Gregory shot back with a sigh. He leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes, at a loss of why things always had to be so difficult. "Stop asking me to go up there. You ask me all the goddamn time, and my answer is always the same, so just stop it. Just tell Daniel he'll have to wait for Clovis, but send him what loyal bodies we have left here so he has what he needs to try and lock the place down. We should be okay with a scarcity of followers in Fayette for now, I think. Also, ask Clovis, politely, to provide us a time frame. It's mind-boggling to me you didn't already have one for me. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised since you're spending your days worrying about colors." "I'm not worried about them at all. It's this moron that's worried," Colin said. "Good God, I'm leaving," Gregory groaned as he got up to leave the room. "Do what I asked." "Why can't you understand it's a possibility?" he heard Frankie ask as he left. Though Gregory rolled his eyes, he did think about it some more. Now feeling somewhat hungry, Gregory made his way to the kitchen. Already there was Maria, who was chewing on something. "Hello there," she said with her mouth still full. "I just made some soup. Would you like some?" "Hi, yes. please, that'd be great," he said as he found a place to sit. "I wanted to talk to you too. I've been doing my best to keep things in order around here on my own. I'm just not used to it, running things. But I do want to at least make the spirit of this mansion better, if nowhere else. At the same time, I can see Blanton struggling, and I feel for him. I want to help him, but I don't know how." "I take it you've never had kids?" Maria asked as she brought him a bowl and sat with him. "Well, I actually did have a son back east, but he was taken from me too soon," Gregory somberly told her. "My boy died far too young, and I never even got to say goodbye." "Gregory," Maria gasped, putting her hand on his arm. He paused, taking a deep breath and patting Maria's hand. Even now, 14 years, 3 months, and 17 days later, it was difficult to speak about it. He was only 4, and at the time, I was working while his mother, my wife, at the time, stayed home with him. One day when I was at work, my wife took him on a ferry ride along the Charisma for what was supposed to be a fun outing. Apparently, he fell into the river while playing with some other children, and the current was unexpectedly rough, so they couldn't save him and never found his body. Maria huffed out a breath. "That's terrible. I'm so sorry to hear it. I didn't mean to—" No, Gregory reassured her. "You didn't know, so no worries. But that's my story." "Whatever happened to your wife, if you don't mind my asking?" Maria followed. "I was a miner back east," Gregory started. "I worked long days and it was hard, dangerous work, but I did it to support my family and didn't mind it one bit. Because of it though, I wasn't home a whole lot, and I suppose life became kind of monotonous, which again, at the time I didn't mind or even notice, to be honest. She could be testy before, but after our son died, the change in her was clear. She started living a different type of life, and after a while she told me she was bored with me and wanted to leave me." "Goodness, what a terrible thing," Maria gasped. "There can be no greater pain for any parent than the loss of a child. For her to abandon you in times like that, though. And for what?" "I don't pretend to understand it, but it definitely broke me for a while. I guess she needed a complete change while I was just trying to hold on to what was left. In any case, after we split, going to work every day in the same place that had supported our family became too much for me to handle. So I had to quit. And that's when I decided to change things up. That's when I came here." "Well, look at you now." Maria's compliment made him smile for what felt like the first time in weeks. "How far you've come, Gregory Calloway." "Thank you," he said. "All right, so you want to know how to help Blanton," Maria said after a brief silence. "The thing about children is their ability to dream is much more available to them than ours is. For a child, there are no limits. If they want to be a star or a leader, or in Blanton's case, from what I know, a strong man, they don't yet have the wall we build at some point that tells us we probably can't do it." "Wow, that's a very well thought out point," Gregory responded in awe. "Yeah, I ain't just some dumb housewife," Maria joked. "I went to school for a while back in New Berkeley when I was younger. But basically the point is Blanton has lofty aspirations of some kind. So if you can satisfy his young mind's hunger to dream, he'll love you forever for it. It's the same reason a good teacher changes a life." "Okay, that makes sense. And I think it gives me an idea. Thank you so much for this, Maria. And for the soup, it was delicious." He approached her and they gave each other a hug with their bodies kept far apart, which he kicked himself for. "Anytime, and anytime you need to talk, just ask," Maria said. "I know things can get hard, but there's too much good inside of you to ever lose sight of the bigger picture." Gregory basked in Maria's validation for the next few days and thought hard, planning out how he could impact Blanton the way she suggested. He was nervous about his ability to impress and relate to the boy, but one morning he worked up the courage to go and try. While Donna was asleep, he snuck into their room and gently shook him. "Hey, Blanton." Gregory held a finger to his mouth for him to be quiet. "Come with me. There's something I want to show you." Blanton hesitated a minute. "I promise it'll just be you and me, buddy." Blanton nodded, and together they snuck out of the room. Once Blanton was dressed, they went outside, and Gregory readied 2 horses. "We'll have to head into town," Gregory said. "I hope you're ready for a big surprise." "What is it? Where are we going?" Blanton asked as they rode off. "Wouldn't be a surprise if I told you," Gregory answered, naturally feeling the fatherly traits he thought he'd lost being dug back out of him. "You don't have to do this just because of what happened, you know," Blanton said after they had reached the town. "I don't want you to feel bad for me or anything." "It's not that at all, Blanton," Gregory assured him, the circus tents now coming into sight. "I want to teach you something I learned much later in life, something that changed the way I see things." "I don't know what that means." "Not yet," Gregory said as their horses marched through the grounds. They soon turned a corner, and ahead of them stood a tremendous man with a mustache and folded arms standing in front of an old red tent. Gregory's watched as Blanton's mouth dropped at the sight of the strong man waiting for them. "Do you see that fellow we're approaching?" "Yes," Blanton answered, visibly excited. "That could be you one day," Gregory said in a low tone. "People will tell you otherwise. They'll say you couldn't reach that goal, but they're wrong. Only you can decide what you can and cannot do, Blanton. Only you can keep yourself from the things you want most, or from getting yourself to them. Don't you ever forget that." Gregory swung off his horse and grabbed the reins of Blanton's. Helping Blanton down, he tied the horses together. "Hello, Blanton," a strong man from the circus greeted as they approached him. "I hear you want to be strong like me." "Yes, sir," Blanton nodded. "Well then how about you train with me, and I can show you how. What do you say?" the man asked. Blanton nodded again with a huge smile and turned to hug Gregory. The hug was what Gregory needed, an affirmation he could be the man he wanted to be. It also made him think of what once was, and he felt a tear form in his eye. He wiped it away as soon as he felt it, though. "So he's agreed to train you once a week for now," Gregory said. "It'll be your time to work hard, and in those times, there will be no Donna, I promise. However, because of that, I'm going to need you to come out when we call you at home, okay? I understand if you want to be alone sometimes, but just don't hide for too long." "I won't," Blanton affirmed, rushing into the tent. Gregory nodded to the strong man, who nodded back, but looked past him as a man on a horse came from behind. It was Frankie. "Gregory, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Colin is gone," Frankie said, panting. "He must have snuck off in the night." It was obvious to Gregory good fortune wasn't meant to last for him, but he still felt better about how things went with Blanton. He took a deep breath and looked up at the sky. "We both know where he went, Frankie," he said. "Go after him. If you can come back as soon as possible, do so. For now, make sure I have someone here to backfill you." "Will do, sir." "Oh, and Frankie, you're doing well," Gregory said, trying to keep things positive. "I'll make sure William knows when he returns." Frankie nodded with a grin and headed off with haste. The strong man took hold of both horses' reins so Gregory could swing back up on his. "You can leave him here for now. Just make sure someone comes back to pick him up in an hour or so." "Yeah, thanks again for this. Maybe one day I'll join you two for a little break. I could use one." "We all do sometimes," the strong man said. As Gregory took the reins back from the strong man, he thought he hadn't heard truer words in a while. And that will do it for part 2. As we saw in part 2, Gregory is starting to come into his own a little bit. He's starting to make the situation in Fayette a little more positive, especially tightening his bond with Blanton, who, as we saw in the beginning of the book, is a little upset in terms of whenever his sister is around, she just needs him to speak, and he just feels like people are just waiting for him to talk so that she can talk and hear what she has to say. But Blanton's confidence was bolstered a little bit by Gregory here. We could also see Gregory's relationship with Maria taking shape and getting reacquainted with Colin and Frankie, Colin being the obsessed rival of Dominic Turner, who, as we saw in book 1, Dominic embarrassed Colin. Colin tried to ambush Dominic and his comrades. A fight ensued, and instead of being able to continue and pursue Dominic, Colin was sent to Fayette. However, as we can see in this chapter, Colin just can't deal with the obsession. He goes back and escapes back north to try and find Dominic. But at the same time, Frankie, the young Keagan gang member, who was basically assigned to assist Colin by Daniel, has now been ordered by Gregory to pursue Colin. So that's where we left off here. Let's move on to part 3. The jail in Harran was a rickety building and had only 2 cells. As Daniel walked up to its porch, he realized that since the Keagans had first moved into the town, he hadn't met a sheriff of any kind. How could there be a jail with no sheriff to oversee it? He thought. Recalling the image of his man who was murdered and covered in a wolfskin, seemingly without obvious cause, Daniel realized that the law in the Murrieta wasn't likely established yet. Still, there had to be some story behind this makeshift prison. He entered the doors to speak to another murderer, the imbecile Charles Langston, because he was desperate for information at this point. With the hold having now been captured for a couple months, he could use Clovis's help and was frustrated by the denials his requests received. Despite his frustration, though, he was somewhat relieved as well. When he thought on his brother's arrival in any place, he always came back to the memory of how Fayette was taken. It was a scar on his mind that would sting him until the day he died. Though there was a battle and resistance staged by the people of that town, the things done to them once the place was taken over were nothing short of brutal. Examples were made of the leaders, and those who remained would know better than to do anything but kneel. The most difficult part of all to deal with, though, was there seemed nothing Daniel could do to stop it once it began. By the time William and him were both involved, the damage had been done. Whether he wanted to risk that damage here in Harran was a creeping doubt he couldn't part with. At the same time, while Gregory was able to send some men from Fayette, Daniel remained the highest-ranking gang member in town. And he did worry for his safety. As such, he cut his days much shorter than usual and made his key appointments very early in the mornings. It was clear, though, he'd need to take matters into his own hands. It was only the crack of dawn, so Daniel expected he'd have to wake Charles up, but jumped a bit when he saw him sitting straight up and staring ahead. "Charles," Daniel greeted. "What the fuck do you want?" Charles was stone-faced and in an almost meditative position. "Oh, I just have a question or two I was hoping you could help me with. Possibly in exchange for a nice steak dinner tonight?" Daniel offered. Charles finally reacted, turning his head with a smile and clapping his hands loudly together. "That's... wow. I don't know what to say to that. It's priceless. Do you take me for some kind of puppy dog? You think I'll help you? You who cut off my balls? You who took that which made me whole? And for no more than a treat?" There was something very different about Charles in his exile. Somehow, Daniel felt for the first time like he was in a conversation where he didn't have the upper hand. The discovery of the recent murder had shaken him up. He knew that, and he was worried he was losing his confidence. He loathed the thought. There's been a murder, and I was wondering if you might know anything." Let's see. Do I know anything? Charles erratically began to yell. "I know! I used to know everything! And now I'm stuck here, in this hellhole, and I hardly even exist! I know you pieces of shit are blind and walking without a stick. Okay. I'm just gonna... Daniel started while walking toward the door to leave. I know, I'm a government man and shouldn't be treated so unlawfully. Charles had not paused from before and was getting louder. He was also sweating profusely now and breathing heavily. There's no government in the Murrieta, you delusional ass, Daniel retorted. Even the cell you sit in is a prop, just like your position. It's all a charade. I know you're... Daniel slammed the door shut and could hear only muffled wails from there. Standing outside the jail, he felt panic flood through his system. No one had any information. No one he interviewed knew a thing, and he kept seeing the grisly scene of the murder over and over again in his head. He was fighting a threat without any information, without any way to negotiate. That's what Daniel did, after all. He talked his way out of things. How could he talk his way out if no one was talking to him? His breath became quick and shallow. He couldn't be seen like this. He didn't know where to go or what to do. But with no one in the streets, he just ran. His legs carried him to the Kennedale home, where he banged loudly on the door. When Cassie answered with a yawn, he begged her for water. Cassie looked scared and hurried Daniel over to the kitchen table as Deborah came down the stairs. Cassie handed him a glass, and as he drank, he realized this was not a good look for him at all. He needed to settle down. I need y'all's help, Daniel told them, deciding he would open himself up. He needed friends somehow, real friends. Even with more of his men in the town and the fling he had with Joanna, he still felt so alone. The men were pawns on a board, and as nice as his barmaid was to fuck, he didn't think she really heard a single word he said. Cassie exchanged a glance with her sister. I'm not sure what we'd be able to help you with. Tell me my fortune, Daniel said as he slicked back his hair that had fallen out of place. What? Deborah followed. You heard me. Daniel looked up, and seeing the fearful reactions on the Kennedales' freckled faces, realized he needed to correct himself. He wasn't even sure why he'd answered so forcefully. It was possible he'd gotten too used to the power of his name. I didn't mean it that way. I just need to know what's to become of me. I feel maybe I've done some kind of wrong. And I wonder if it'll consume me. If it's already consumed me. If y'all don't want to help me, I get it. I understand if y'all feel like I'm a villain. But I'm trying my best to make this situation right, I really am. No, we'll help you. Deborah jumped. He was glad to see compassion in each of their eyes. Yeah, of course we'll tell you your fortune, Cassie was quick to say, exchanging glances with her sister. From the moment he met them, Daniel was impressed by the sisters' ability to communicate silently. It was secretive, but he knew all families had secrets. Did something happen? Cassie asked. You always seem so calm and collected. Why the sudden change? There's been another murder, Daniel informed them, partly to see their reaction and partly to continue on the trend of honesty. It was a gruesome one, and I thought we'd have rid ourselves of that by now, but I guess not. I also haven't the slightest idea of where to begin with it, and like I said, I worry about my responsibility in all this. In all of what exactly? Cassie asked. What's become of this whole place, you know? Daniel pondered. Harran and the Riverlands and the Murrieta in general. And not even just what's past, but also my role in what's to come. I'm hoping it isn't too late for me to do some good in this world. If I haven't ruined that chance already. I thought I was doing my part for the greater good. But lately, I wonder. I just don't know anymore. Within that fear you have of hurting others is a caring heart, Daniel, Deborah assured him. The lack of that's what makes a person evil, and that isn't you. Let's get you to the tomorrow room and we can tell you what we see, okay? Cassie said. For the first time that day, Daniel felt more like himself. He was taking action, at least. The sisters led him up the stairs and into a somewhat cheaply decorated room with colorful curtains hanging to cover the walls. It was all very purple, and there were many odd shapes and symbols. Daniel would normally roll his eyes at the spectacle of places like this, but he tried to be respectful and more understanding. Deborah pulled out a seat, which he motioned for him to sit on, and the Kennedales took their places on the other side of the table, facing him. "We always like to begin with some information before we work with our clients," Deborah said. Daniel didn't like the idea of being considered a client, as he had always been skeptical of this type of thing. But again, he forced himself to be open-minded. "Just so you're comfortable with how we're going to do things here. It won't be nothing too crazy or dangerous, so don't you worry," Deborah said. "Our sessions involve a combination of cartomancy and precognition," Cassie explained as she placed a deck of strange cards on the table. "As Deborah said, you shouldn't expect any pain or a fearful experience of any kind. Our readings have stirred emotions in the past, though." "Carto what now?" Daniel asked, not following much of what was said. "Basically, we use cards to tell us things about your past, present, and future," Deborah explained as the pace of her words became faster. "What the cards tell us will provide reactions and information from you that will then lead us to premonitions of the future," Cassie further elaborated. "To be honest, y'all's little spiel about all this is only making me more on edge," Daniel half joked. Cassie stuck the deck of cards out in front of Daniel. "You asked for this, didn't you?" she said coyly. "Just shuffle these cards and spread them out face down on the table." Daniel shuffled and did as directed. "I see you're a big card player, huh?" Deborah grinned with a wink. "I wouldn't sit down at a table with you." "But you haven't even flipped the cards over yet," Daniel exclaimed. "How did you—" "Oh no, that wasn't a reading," Deborah said, as she and Cassie laughed. Cassie brought the cards back into the deck and gave half to Deborah. "It was only a presumption." The Kennedales turned 6 cards over each, arranged on the table very specifically, but in no way Daniel could figure out the pattern. They did it so quickly and even placed some cards in front of the other sisters' set, rather than with their own 6. Once the cards were placed, they each cocked their heads sideways at the exact same moment. Daniel squinted his eyes, trying to look closely to see if there was some kind of tiny words on the cards or tablecloth, but there was nothing he could discern. Cassie and Deborah continued to observe, their faces changing expressions at the same moments. It was as if the same story were playing out in front of each of them. The flickering of expression soon stopped, and they both frowned. "What is it?" Daniel asked nervously. "Y'all don't look too thrilled." "We feel—" Cassie started. Resentful doubt crept into Daniel's mind. "We feel there is hope for you yet, Daniel," Deborah followed. Both sisters' eyes were closed. Relief swept over Daniel. "Yes! Yes!" Cassie sat up straight, with Deborah following in sync. "Hope there is. There can be no change without change. There can be no good without good. I want there to be good. I can change," Daniel said enthusiastically. "How do I need to change?" The Kennedales opened their eyes for a brief moment and looked toward one another. They closed them again soon after, and their expressions went sour. "You will be tested," Deborah said. "Tested by forces that come from behind. Will you look in the mirror in time to see them? What does... Are you saying I'll be betrayed?" Daniel asked. "By who? And a mirror? So, will I betray myself? Tell me, please." The Kennedales became very relaxed. Daniel read their faces as neither negative nor positive. "Look to the sky, and you will find the answers," Deborah said. "Look to the sky, and you will find the truth." After Cassie finished, their eyes opened, and they appeared as if they had returned to their normal selves. "I think I'm leaving with more questions than answers, but I need to be going now." Daniel stood up now without the same panic as he had felt earlier, but he needed to prepare for whatever was coming. "If you feel that way, then you heard what we have said loud and clear," Cassie said, both sisters still sitting as he moved toward the door. "Reflect on it further, and you'll discover what it is you need to do." If you ever need to talk to us again, feel free to come on over," Deborah called. Daniel sensed an almost flirtatious tone, and though she wasn't particularly attractive, he somehow still appreciated it. "Thank you for this," he said sincerely as he walked out of the strange room and onward out of the Kennedale house altogether. For the first time he could remember, besides in times when he was physically ill, Daniel spent the entire afternoon inside the walls of his hotel room. He was not sulking, but contemplating fiercely. What did it all mean? How did he need to change? What was he missing? How would he find it? And if he did, how would he react in turn? When one of his men came to his door to check on him, Daniel told him to round up all the Keagan men and all the townspeople of Harran for a speech he would give at sunset. He didn't yet know what he'd say, but he knew he needed to say something. And that will do it for tonight's episode of Tuesday Night Fiction. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you're enjoying the ride. Thank you to all the Civil Gang members who have made it this far. Welcome if you are new to the process. I will say, if you're new and you're hearing this message, you might want to start over from episode 1. This is a serial podcast. It would most be enjoyed chronologically. Also, if this sounds exciting, whether you're new or you've been here and you just don't want to wait anymore, you just want to continue with the story and find out what happens, there are books available for this series. Books 1 through 4 are released right now. As I mentioned, we're about halfway through book 2. All of the series will eventually be in podcast form. It will all be free to listen to in podcast form. However, if you like the podcast and you would like to support it, buying the books is the best way to do that. They're available on Amazon in paperback or ebook. I'd prefer if you buy the paperback. Obviously, it's more support, but on top of that, it's just nice to have books around. You will look sophisticated. They are very pretty. The covers are pretty, and reading is good for you. So buy the books if you like what you're hearing. Even if you don't necessarily like to read, or even if maybe you just prefer the listening. Like I said, it supports, it helps, it keeps this going. So I would greatly appreciate it, and let me know your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts here. Let me know your thoughts on Amazon. If you've already read the books, let me know your thoughts. Feel free to post reviews on Amazon or Goodreads or both, preferably both. Let people know on social media that you like it. Let's grow the Civil Gang. Let's expand our reach. We are expanding every day. The listens are going up every day. I am super proud of that. This podcast has been a great experience. Next week, we'll be back with a recap. Who knows what I'm going to talk about? But what I do know is that I will be streaming live on Instagram next week for the first time. Again, not on YouTube. The video will be eventually posted on YouTube, but the streaming will just be on Instagram. So follow me at NBAustinBooks if you would like to be a part of the live stream. Come on, let me know your thoughts, and let's start a conversation. Let's meet the Civil Gang. Let's join the Civil Gang and affirm your allegiance. Come in and affirm your allegiance, because we're on a warpath. Anyway, one of the other things I'll talk about next week, as I mentioned a second ago, books 1 to 4 are released in the series. Book 5 is being worked on as we speak. So that is going to be the final book in the series. Once this series is done, I'm going to continue on. I don't know whether I'm going to write a new series or just write a standalone book. Who knows? But be part of the ride. The podcast will always be free. And even the podcast will continue on even after the series is done. So subscribe on YouTube, follow on Instagram, subscribe on any of your favorite podcatchers. They're on all of them. Spotify, Google Play Music, Stitcher, whatever you listen to. Subscribe. Let your friends know that this is a cool place to hang out. And feel free to reach out on my contact form at www.nbaustinbooks.com or social media or wherever. Anyway, I've talked too much. Thanks for listening in. I will talk to you again next week. This has been Nicholas Austin. This has been Tuesday Night Fiction. You're a legend. Good night.
The sound will call you, spirit true. I swear I'll hear that sound in you.
The Tuesday Night Fiction podcast, the Civilands series, and the musical